In the 1999 movie, The Matrix, the protagonist Neo meets a young boy bending a spoon with his mind. Seeing his confusion, the boy explains, "Hey mate, basically, there isn't a spoon." This shows the boy's deep understanding of the mechanics of his world, as despite all of his senses telling him that he is holding a spoon, he understands that it is a simulation. The idea of the "there is no spoon" achievement in Factorio is similar. To achieve "there is no spoon," you need a deep understanding of the mechanics of the game so that you can complete it within 7 hours. Speed-wise, my skills are lacking at best, so let's see what happens. As you can see here, I'm going to be using completely default settings, except for changing the research queue to always available. It's important that if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it legitimately, so all the biter settings are completely default, as well as the map generation settings. There's a couple of things we're looking for in a map to make it good for this run. First of all, it needs to have no nearby biters, and good natural defences like water and cliffs. The less time we spend fighting biters, the more time we spend building the factory. Secondly, it needs all the resources nearby. The starting patches being close together will help, but most importantly, oil should not be far. Finally, we need large nearby patches of iron and copper, as well as possibly coal. Our first stone and oil patches will likely last us the entire game, but we will absolutely piss through iron and copper. This one looks good. We have a decent oil patch not too far west, as well as 2 big iron patches and 1 big copper patch just a little bit further. Furthermore, we are surrounded on 2 sides by water, but still have a big area to build the factory. This'll be the one. For maximum efficiency, we skip the cutscene. Please forgive me. As with any playthrough, the very first thing we do is go and mine a rock. It's a lot more efficient than mining the coal out of the ground, and also gives us some extra stone for free. As soon as we've got all that coal, we place down the burner miners straight away. The faster we're producing iron, the faster we can produce more burner miners to produce more iron. And while that first iron produces, I go on the quest for more stone. I return and get some more burner miners to get some more iron. To build more burner miners to mine more burnable materials to burn mining materials to build more burner miners. Tum bum bum dum 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 bum bum. With our access to more burner miners to mine more material, are you sick of that bit yet? Because I am. We have copper now, and with that we can get some electricity going. Electricity allows us to easily electrify every entity, excluding extremely exhaust-emitting excavators. Okay, I may have lied a moment ago, but this is actually the last time. Anyhow, we're almost 12 minutes in, and this speedrun is still looking a bit like a speed walk, so it's time to kick things into gear. I'm talking more burners, some intermediate assemblers to cut down on handcrafting time, and dare I say, the foundations of some smelting stacks. There are over 2,000 subscribers to my channel. That's 1 subscriber for every 4 viewers of this video. The only question is, how do we subscribe the other 3? Jeez, that was weird. So, as I was saying, what we really need now is some smelting arrays as they're the first step towards a proper automated factory. We can plan out however many we need now, so I can do more building and less thinking later. I settle on 3 iron and 2 copper, and a half stack at the end for stone. We don't need to build all of it right now. In fact, most of it we won't even use until yellow and purple science, so we only build half an array of iron and copper, enough to automate red and green science. But before we do anything else, it's useful to have a mini-mall pulling straight off the bus for things like belts and gears. Every minute spent not handcrafting is a minute in the light. Another important thing to automate is green circuits, and this is certainly one of the designs of all time. You've probably seen it a million times, so I'm basically just showing it so you know it exists. Here's another one you've probably seen a million times. Feast your eyes, acknowledge its existence, and continue all the same. I also automate some ammo production. Since this is completely default settings, we're going to have to fight biters at some point. Here, we have red and green science, both automated at 60 science per minute. It's boring stuff, so I skipped the process, but now that we have this we can get some proper research done. First though, we have some neighbours far too close to our pollution cloud. Rest assured, this transgression will not be allowed to continue, and they won't trouble us for much longer. Just walking up and planting turrets on their doorstep like this feels fantastically cheesy, but it's a speedrun. We don't have time to play fair. With our bloodlust satiated, we need to start blue science ASAP. Starting from the bottom, our first logical step would be steel, so I'm going to quickly get that set up. Unfortunately, I forgot earlier to incorporate the furnaces to actually smelt the steel here, so it's going to stick out the side like a hernia. Whilst I'm building it, however, I look on the map and notice my pollution cloud approaching yet another nest. At this point, evolution is still very low, so they stand no chance against my wall of turrets. Nevertheless, it still takes time. and that is time I could have been spending building the factory. We are now approaching the hour mark. For reference, in the default settings current world record by anti-elites, he already had blue science set up and was working on getting robots. On the other hand, we still don't even have steel. I finally get around to finishing that steel setup. I don't build the whole thing, we don't need it all yet, so I again just build half, and then put the overflowing iron onto the bus. I get grenades automated, we know what they're for. I also decide to bring up the achievement UI here, just to make it a bit more clear how much time we have left. I hook up stone to its smelting array for some reason, despite it not being needed for blue science besides in tiny amounts for oil buildings. I really need to work on my priorities. But I do eventually start building an engine setup, so at least that's a step in the right direction. It's another one of those done to death builds, but hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But with engines complete, it's time to lay down what's going to be my oil supply pipeline. This oil patch really is tiny, but we don't need very much to carry us through to the end of the game, so it's alright. I've said this before, and I definitely will say it again, but connecting up pump jacks is the absolute worst part of the entire game. I leave some turrets because this is our most remote outpost so far, and I don't want to need to run all the way here in the case of a biter attack. I would say that the first oil setup is the point of transition between the early game and the mid game, so here we are, crossing into the mid game at around the 80-minute mark. For reference, the fastest speedruns are closing in on the end around here. There's a small coal patch just above the oil setup, which I can use exclusively for plastic. So I set up a little plastic setup, and then completely forget to connect the coal. It's got like 2 inputs, how do I even manage that? But it's fine, because I quickly come back and do it. It's not like it was ever world record pace to begin with. I also set up a little sulfur build. It's another one of those it just exists kind of builds. I will never look at it again, it's enough to last us the entire game unaltered. Very importantly, if you look at the bottom now, you'll see something is being damaged somewhere. If you look on the minimap, you will see it's our oil outpost under attack. If we look on the big map, we can see that it's because of a nest very close by on the left, so we'll need to sort that out soon. It's also right on top of those iron and copper patches we wanted to claim later, so it's quite productive if we go and sort that out at some point. So we pick up some ammo and off we go. It's the usual turret creep, I'm afraid it won't get much more interesting than that, but with some extra grenades thrown in to help. Oil patch defended, future resources secured. Now that blue science isn't going to build itself, I was going to say again about how this was a mostly uninteresting build, but I think this made me realise that I just think all vanilla builds are quite uninteresting. I used to build a quirky hexagon-ish design for red circuits, but for the interest of speed, I think these long, flat designs are just always the best. But I suppose we are going after there is no spoon, so it's a necessary evil. And that was our final ingredient for blue science, so clocking in at a little over 96 minutes, we'll call it 97, that is our third science pack ticked off the list. And we can bring that into our little science setup and move right on to the next one. We have a lot to prepare before we can start properly producing the next 2 science packs, starting with building even more power production. I'm conscious of some possible future biter attacks, so I'm placing turrets around the most essential and vulnerable extremities of the base. The next step in preparing for yellow and purple science is upgrading our refineries to advanced oil processing. It is not only required for heavy oil to lubricant, but also because it makes a lot more efficient use of crude oil, which is important when our oil patch is so small. At this point, the next logical step would be to set up oil cracking, but in the middle of that, I get distracted and decide to go on a rampage. In theory it makes sense, the less biters in my pollution cloud, the less time needing to be spent sorting out defences, but I wasn't even getting attacked much at this point. A better use of my time would have been continuing pushing through science and going on the offense only once it's necessary. The biters know this too, as for my slight, I pay the ultimate price. No saves coming this time, I'll have you know, this shit is legit. Run of shame included. The crazy thing is, we actually killed the worm that killed us before we died. It's retribution time, baby. Okay, all this retribution is taking a bit longer than I would have hoped. That is more like it. Out to the northeast, we find a massive coal patch. We will likely need this to supplement our power later, once the starting coal gets patchy. Thank you, I'm here all night. I would like to point out this absolutely crack driving job. They'll have me in Fast and Furious any day now. Considering how balls Factorio's driving mechanics are, I should get medals for this shit. You might remember a bit ago, I was meant to be making a cracking setup. Yeah, I finally get around to that, only 12 minutes later. We're on to a new recording session here, and I had a long break and some time to think, The plan as it is now is simple. Step 1. Build yellow and purple science to 20 science per minute. Step 2. Connect the big iron and copper patches. Step 3. Run around fixing bottlenecks and putting out fires until the rocket is researched. Step 4. Divert all resources to rocket production. Step 5. Win. Yes, you did just watch me make all of yellow science as B-roll whilst I described my master plan. You've seen it 1,000 times, you can deal with it. The issue of the moment now is copper production, so I had a new furnace stack. This is a band-aid solution at best, as the true bottleneck lies upstream at the miners themselves. But you've just listened to my master plan, so you know that the solution to that is going to come later on after purple science. Talking of purple science, you know what that means? More B-roll. We're going to spend this time around the campfire talking about why you, yes you, should get the There Is No Spoon achievement if you haven't already. We have limited time living on this speck of dust in the universe called Earth, and to spend it playing Factorio is a noble use. But there is so much Factorio, so many mods, and so little time, so by playing a There Is No Spoon run and growing your skills in this game, you'll be doing things faster and becoming a better problem solver, increasing your Factorio to time ratio, so effectively increasing your fun to time ratio. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Whether that was the ramblings of a dehydrated man on the end of a 3-hour editing session, or whether that was profound, is up to you. I lied, it's not. The answer is that it was audio to fill B-roll footage. How backwards is that? The new issue of the minute is getting this purple science actually into the labs. With 3 lanes, we are beyond the capabilities of run inserters, so we need to do some belt shenanigans to fit it all in. This design gives... So, wowza, all science builds done at 2 hours and 54 minutes. You might start to think we're on the home stretch, right? Oh sweet summer child, this is barely the beginning. That might have been moderately dramatic, but yes, we still have a lot to do. Theoretically, this base can produce 20 science per minute, but the incoming resources simply aren't sufficient. Plus, with evolution progressing and our pollution cloud getting ever bigger, defence will only become a more and more arduous task. Your question to me now is probably, why the hell isn't he getting construction bots and using those for building these miners? To counter this, I asked, why the hell didn't I get construction bots and use those for building these miners? Such is the battle between a man and his narrator. Well, here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna go back to watching this video and you're gonna enjoy it, and you're gonna pretend it was a challenge all along to do this about bots. But anyway, all those miners mean we need even more power now. If we're lucky, this might be the last time we need to expand this. If these copper mines start getting attacked, it's going to take us a hell of a long time to get back out here, so I'm leaving some of my demoed turrets to hold the fort. We only have 3 real bottlenecks left to clear up before we can move on to finishing the game. Copper ore production, which we're fixing as we speak, iron ore production, which we can easily get around to, and then steel production, which is as easy as upgrading those stone furnaces to steel ones. Uh-oh. It looks like the locals don't like my coal mine. I couldn't possibly hazard a guess as to why. But, oh well, nothing a few gun turrets can't handle. Fighters who attack once usually attack again in the same place, so we can leave some turrets around and rest assured that the nest they came from is sorted, for now. I get some military science handcrafting. I want some fighting bots to help me if there's any more nests we need to clear, but for now, we still have bottlenecks to fix. Fighting can come later to give us something to do while things research. The next thing I can fix is iron ore production, so I get right onto tapping one of those big patches. I don't think we'll end up needing both, as this one's quite large. By the magic of video editing, it's back at our base already. It's only 1 belt for now, but as we use more and more of the starting patch, we can bring in more and more from the new one. And with all this newfound iron ore, we can expand the steel setup, as it's woefully underproducing compared to what we need right now. We also build our final smelting stack, for whilst avoiding another furnace building compilation, the only footage I have of it is whilst I'm messing around in a menu. In the midst of my work, the defender capsule research finishes, and I think screw it, I want to take these for a spin. Before we go anywhere, I left my damn car at the mining outpost when I ran the belt back, so we need to make the walk of shame to go and get it first. I've not ever really used them before, since by the time I need to incorporate distractions into my offense, I usually have the higher tier bots. But this is a special case, and we make do with what we have. Anyway, as is customary, we turn the nest into absolute Swiss cheese. It's difficult to tell whether the bots had any effect on this outcome, but I know they're trying their hardest. The The medium worm is just eating those hits, likely due to our damage upgrade research being pitiful, meaning none. But in the end it falls, and so do we. I ain't got time to walk all that way. This is the future, baby. No more walk of shame, only the drive of shame. I find my turrets being slowly chipped away by rogue spitters, but I quickly deal with them. Okay, maybe not quickly, this is 2 times speed, but I do deal with them. This next nest stands no chance, however. I arrive like a tidal wave and wipe it away into the sand. But alas, you aren't here to see me destroy nests. I clean up some more across the northern border, and once I reach the coal patch to the northeast I get some miners and defences set up, so I can more easily link it to our base later on when our starting coal patch starts to run dry. The only bottleneck left for 20 signs per minute is steel, and that just needs the furnaces upgrading to the steel variety, so I get them automated straight off the bus so we can get them sorted soon and unlock our base's full production potential. A full smelting setup using steel furnaces requires red belts to feed them, so I'm getting that set up while we wait for them to produce. A good tip when making this upgrade is that since the yellow belt can support 12 steel furnaces, you only need to upgrade the first half of the input belt and the last half of the output belt. This is because by the time the ore has gone past the first 12 furnaces, there should only be a yellow belt worth of it left, and on the output, the yellow belt won't be full until it has passed the first 12 furnaces, so you don't need to upgrade to red until after those first 12 furnaces. I said the word furnaces so many times there, I'm starting to get a bit of jamais vu. Despite what I just said, I would recommend upgrading a few extra belts either way, just to account for any possible jank which would lead to missed out production. So anyway, in the end I finish upgrading it, and our base will finally be at peak production. I decide that, hell, we have a lot of oil kicking around, so I might as well start stockpiling rocket fuel so we have one less thing to worry about later. I have to say, I don't think I've ever seen someone put a build together so inefficiently. It's like I don't even know the hotbars there. I also start producing 4 productivity free modules in the background. They are stupid overpowered when placed in the rocket silo, changing the requirement from 100 rocket parts worth of resources to only 72. Don't ever make a rocket without having 4 productivity free modules in the silo. You might also realise I'm researching bullet damage research, despite that having decidedly zero use for getting that rocket launched. But the last thing I need right now is biters breaking through my meagre defences, and yellow and purple science will still accumulate in the background whilst it researches. My next course of action is to add a 3rd iron ore belt to the big patch to keep up with production, and I also buff up the defences a bit whilst I'm there. At our current rate of production, reaching the end within the time limit will be an absolute cakewalk. The only issue is keeping the natives off us in the meantime. Spot what's wrong here. I don't notice, not for a while anyway. Considering what you've just seen, and what I'm doing right now, try to predict what's going to happen soon. Gotcha. I realise it, and fix the issue. Now that wasn't what you were expecting. Don't worry, there's plenty of time left for a catastrophe. And in fact, a few minutes later, whilst feeding the assemblers for the production free modules, I noticed they aren't receiving enough electricity. It appears that the boilers aren't getting enough coal. It is imperative that we get more coal into them before the base falls into a death spiral, where coal production is limited by low power, which further limits power production, which further limits coal production, continuing until the base completely blacks out. Blacking out on a normal playthrough is bad enough, but when you have a time limit that's a whole nother can of worms. Adding that other belt was a band-aid solution at best, as the patch itself is drying up. What we really need is a reliable coal source to last us the rest of the game, so it's time to go up and tap that big patch we found up to the northeast. It's going to take a while for that coal to make its way down to the power plant, so I'm disconnecting the big iron and copper mines temporarily to ensure we have plenty of power going to the coal mines. I also go up and add more coal miners since the initial amount was absolutely pitiful. Also, whilst I was away, a group of biters decided to attack a random stretch of belts for no reason, then just stopped and ran into our turrets. I'll leave some turrets here anyway, just in case their brethren return to try and finish the job. Doing a bit of scouting whilst I wait for coal to build up, I notice this nest just to the east of our coal mine, thankfully before it notices the wonderful coal fume pollution, and I have time to build some defences against it. I drive back past a beautifully saturated coal line. I think we're ready for the iron and copper mines to be plugged back in. The lost production was bad, but we had some science stockpiled, so hopefully we can get quickly back on track. I'm starting to think about the rocket now. The only basic resource we need, which we don't already have automated, is concrete for the silo, so we set that up. The components for rocket parts I will build later, as they will be taking resources from the then obsolete science builds. I decided that right around here is where my rocket silo is going to go, so I get the machines ready to build rocket control units, the only remaining component of rocket parts. Rocket fuel we have already been stockpiling, and LDS I can just reroute from yellow science production. LDS is producing at 20 units per minute, and rocket fuel is stockpiled anyway, so I'm building my rocket control units to also be 20 units per minute. And we are in business, ladies and gentlemen. 1000 steel, 1000 concrete, 200 processing units, 200 electric engines, 100 pipes, and a whopping 30-second crafting time later, we have the first step in our win condition. Research has stopped completely now. All resources and production are going towards the rocket silo, so we can GTFO ASAP. RCUs and rocket fuel are already connected, and once we connect up the LTS it'll just be a waiting game. Almost forgot to add the productivity free modules. Like I said before, there is no situation I have ever come across where the best option for rocket silo modules wasn't for productivity free modules. So, we need 72 rocket parts to finish the rocket, meaning 720 of each ingredient. At 20 items per minute, that adds up to 36 minutes of waiting, so all we have to do is keep the factory secure and powered in that time. As you can see on the left here, our red circuits aren't quite keeping up with demand, and I don't notice this for a while, so probably a bit longer than 36 minutes. But if I'm honest, what a disappointing 40 minutes it ended up being. Almost nothing happened beyond a few biter attacks which our turrets handled easily. I was hoping for some big fight keeping them off the silo whilst we waited for the last few items to be inserted, but alas, this is no Warped or Rio or Rampant or Death World. A big swarm does hit our miners whilst the rocket prepares, but it's much too little, much too late. Where there should have been victory, there is only melancholy. I used to hate biters, but playing now where they pose no real threat, it's just not the same. Our supposedly sweet victory feels boring and run of the mill. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Special thank you to our patrons: Dick Dastardly Enthusiast, Larry, Marco Zafran, Handlebars, Matthias Faison, Fen Blue, Leo, and LLLJJJ. You guys make this possible.